Welcome to another DeBacco University video. Here looking at identifying basic bones of the body. So here we're going to look at parts of the skeletal system and some of the major bones that you should be able to recognize and identify. Well, starting in general with bones. Well, bones comprise the vertebral skeleton of animals, which protects the various organs of the body. Remember, this is an endoskeleton. It looks kind of very porous, as we can see here. And in those pores, when the organism is living, it will produce red and white blood cells. It also stores minerals, provides structure and support for the body, and enable mobility. Bones come in a variety of shapes and sizes and have complex internal and external structures that's lightweight but yet strong. And we're going to go over some of those, focusing mainly on the human body here. So when we're classifying our bones, we have four general classifications as presented here. We have the long bones, which include the femur, tibia, fibula, humerus, radius, and ulna. We also have short bones, and those are the carpals of the wrist and tarsals of the ankle. We have our flat bones, like for example our skull or sternum, and then irregular bones, such as our vertebrae or our pelvis. And here we have the skull and mandible, and the skull is the bony structure that forms the head and vertebrates. It supports the structure of the face, provides a protective cavity for the brain, and over here we see a collection of skulls. The mandible is the lower jaw, or what's typically referred to as the jawbone, and is the largest, strongest bone in the human face, and it holds the lower teeth in place. In the image directly over here, we notice it's highlighted in green to highlight exactly where the mandible is located in distinct relation to the skull. Now we have something called vertebrae, and these are individual bones that comprise the vertebral column that has curves. The natural curves have add more strength in a straight line, so it can support the weight of the body and provide balance needed to walk. The sections of the vertebral column include the cervical, thoracic, and the lumbar regions. We can see here the cervical, here's the thoracic, here's the lumbar, and then the fused areas way down here would be the pelvic region in addition. Then we have the rib cage, and rib cage functions to protect the heart and lungs in the thoracic cavity. Also aids in respiration, provides support for the upper limbs. Three main classifications of ribs based on different points of attachment. We have our true or fixed ribs that have a direct point of attachment to the sternum. We have our false ribs, and these kind of have this kind of cartilage connection that then attaches to the sternum. And then we have the floating ribs here, which are simply not attached in any way to the sternum. However, this image is slightly inaccurate. This rib here should have a piece of cartilage attaching it there. There should only be two floating ribs. Those attachment points, those true ribs 1 through 7 are attached to that costal cartilage directly to that sternum. The false ribs here are 8 through 10 and are not attached to the sternum but to the costal cartilage of the 7th rib above. And then the floating ribs, the last two, 11 and 12, are only attached to the vertebrae and no direct attachment, even with cartilage, to the sternum. Then we have the pelvis. This is the area of attachment of the upper leg bones and contains portions of the vertebral column, those fused portions down here. And we can see this is definitely an irregular bone, one of the strongest bones because it is the main point of attachment, and a lot of the weight and pressure is exerted in this area of the body. Then we get to our leg bones, and these we have the femur here, the large one here. It's a thigh bone. It's the longest bone and is considered to be the strongest bone in the body. Then we have the patella, which is known as the kneecap. It's a flat, circular, triangular bone that protects the knee joint. We have the fibula, which is a long, thin, and lateral bone of the lower leg and is parallel to the tibia and helps stabilize the ankle and support the muscles of the lower leg. And then we have the tibia here, known as the shin bone, and is the second largest bone in the body. A lot of people confuse the tibia and the fibula. Tibia you can think as thicker here because it is a thicker of the two bones in the lower leg. Looking at the arm now, we have the humerus, and we have the radius and the ulna here. So we can see initially kind of a similar structure to what we saw in the leg, but of course smaller bones overall, and the radius and ulna allows a rotation to occur there. Then we get into the hands, and the hand is located at the distal end of each arm. It's the end. And we can see we have our carpals, which are kind of the wrist bones there, the metacarpals, and then the phalanges that we have here. And there would be an interior and a posterior view when we're looking at the rotation of how those would be presented. And lastly, we have the feet, and this is the terminal portion of the limb which bears the weight and allows locomotion or movement. It can also be important for footprints. Looking at the foot here in the bone structure, we see very similar to the hands. So be mindful of that there are a lot of similarities between the upper limbs and lower limbs, and being able to provide a distinction of those can be important when you're looking to identify bones of the body.